Yo, what is up guys? Welcome back to the SUPES channel. My name is Matthew Ramos, and on this channel I aim to entertain, inform, and inspire using the topic of discussion as always, which is superheroes. So guys, this weekend Aquaman came out, and I got a chance to watch the film a day early, and I'm gonna give my thoughts on it down in this video. So let's break it down right now. So starting with my three biggest positive takeaways from this film. My first takeaway is that the visual effects and the way this movie looks is amazing, guys. Practically mostly everything in this movie is CGI. Most of the films take place underwater in Atlantis, which is all CGI. And some of the shots that you get are just insane. And I just love how everything looks, from Black Manta's costume, Mera's costume, Aquaman's costume, Ocean Master. All of the character designs look stunning. And a lot of the times in this film, you get a lot of shots that you could just screenshot and turn it into an instant poster. This film is absolutely gorgeous, and the CGI is so perfect. I didn't find the CGI to be very cartoony, unlike Steppenwolf in Justice League. And I thought the CGI and visual effects were absolutely amazing in this movie. Second, from my three positive takeaways from Aquaman, is the cinematography. The way this movie is shot is absolutely gorgeous. Now, not only are all the visual effects stunning, as I previously stated, but the way the action sequences were filmed was something I had never seen before in a comic book film. It felt like, especially in the scene that we got from the trailers where Aquaman is battling against Black Manta and Mera is battling against Black Manta's, goons or whatever. And it felt like some of the action sequences were all done in one take. Like, it was all a one cut. The camera just rotated in such a way that it was just beautiful cinematography across the entire film. And all of the action sequences, which were the highlights of the film, and the action sequences were filmed in a way that, made this movie different from any other comic book movie. I had never seen a comic book movie film their action sequences or have action sequences that took place the way they did in this movie. So that is second for my three biggest positive takeaways from Aquaman. And number one on my three biggest positive takeaways from Aquaman is the characters. I loved the character of all of the characters, from Volko, Aquaman, Mera, Black Manta, Ocean Master, Queen Atlanta. I fell in love with all of these characters. I felt that all of the actors really, embodied the role of these characters. And I just felt that all of these characters, contributed so much to this film. And all the actors did a stunning job on, bringing these comic book characters to the big screen. So I also enjoyed the chemistry and the relationships between all of the actors and their character relationships that took place in this film. And yeah, number one on my biggest positive takeaways from Aquaman is the characters. Now, number two on my biggest negative takeaways from Aquaman is the soundtrack. The soundtrack was absolutely atrocious, and I literally felt like they just, in some of the scenes where some of the soundtracks played in the background, I felt that they just picked the most random song on the internet and played it behind that scene. And the soundtrack was one of my biggest disappointments, because from that final trailer, where the music that played behind that trailer was absolutely amazing. And I even pointed that out in my Aquaman final trailer reaction. And I absolutely loved that music. And that music was nowhere to be found in this movie. You know, I thought they misused the soundtrack, and a lot of the music didn't fit at all whatsoever. So that was a big letdown for me going into this movie, because from that I absolutely loved the music from that final trailer, and I had a feeling that it was going to be the main score for Aquaman. You know, every superhero has its theme music, and unfortunately, Aquaman doesn't really have his own theme music, unlike Superman, Wonder Woman, and all of the big superhero names that we know and love today. So coming in at number 1 on my biggest negative takeaways from Aquaman is the pacing. Guys, I felt like the pacing of this movie was absolutely horrible. You know, yes, the plot progressed, but I felt that at the end of after watching the film, I felt like I had just sat through a 5-hour movie. You know, this movie feels really, really long, and for me, it got very, very exhausting. And towards the end of the film, once the film ended, I was very exhausted after watching this movie, because I felt like a lot of the acts that happened towards the beginning of the film, you know, I felt like they could have been trimmed down or cut out. And, you know, looking back a couple weeks back to Into the Spider-Verse, I felt like nothing in that movie should have been cut out. Every single scene in that movie was significant, and I didn't feel the same way with Aquaman. I felt like the film could have definitely been trimmed down. And while watching the film, I even checked my phone an hour into the movie, and they were still, you know, towards the beginning of their main mission in order to take down Ocean Master, which, you know, that's what it leads up to in the third act. And I felt that this film was very exhausting. Definitely exhausting is the word I would use. And I found myself very tired after watching this movie. Now, I've discussed my 3 biggest positives, my 3 biggest negatives, and now I want to talk about the thing that for me would make or break this movie, which is Jason Momoa's portrayal as Aquaman. I thought after watching Justice League, which wasn't a very good movie for me, and I didn't like it at all, for me, Jason Momoa as Aquaman was one of the biggest takeaways from that film, and his portrayal of Aquaman in that movie definitely gave me high hopes going into this film. However, I didn't really, you know, I liked his portrayal as Aquaman. However, I felt like there was a lot of flaws in the way the character was written, and that is something that is not in Jason Momoa's control. I felt that, you know, the character is practically 35 to 40 years old, and he's making jokes and acting like if he's an 18-year-old kid. And it was very awkward because a lot of the jokes that he made weren't funny at all. And from the acting perspective, Jason Momoa isn't very good at comedy. So a lot of the jokes that they designed this character to be making never hit for me. And it was just a very awkward moment in the theater because, you know, none of my audience members were laughing. So it was just a joke would play out and it would just be silence. You know, it would never draw a reaction from the audience, unlike, you know, the comedy from the MCU movies. So I felt that they were definitely trying to piggyback off of the, you know, lighthearted MCU tone, but that was one of my biggest negatives about this movie. This movie was at its best when the tone was very serious and, you know, stuff was going down, and Jason Momoa wasn't making jokes when he's in the middle of a battle with Ocean Master or Black Manta. And those scenes are the best part of this movie by far. And then I definitely felt that Jason Momoa, you know, didn't really own this role. He did play it well, but he's not a character that, or an actor that I would say after watching this movie is born to play Aquaman. You know, after watching Wonder Woman and Superman and Man of Steel, I definitely said these Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot, they were born to play these characters. And I feel like Jason Momoa doesn't fall in that category of actors that are born to play certain characters. I definitely think that he, gave his own portrayal, and his rendition of the Aquaman character was definitely very different from anything we've ever seen before. But I thought the flaws of the character was in the way it was written. And it's definitely an issue when you have a 35 to 40-year-old character who's acting like an 18-year-old. Like, he's not Peter Parker, a 15-year-old, Spider-Man. Like, he shouldn't be acting so immature. And that's something that I very disliked about the Aquaman character in this film. So, guys, there are my thoughts about the Aquaman film. Overall, I give this movie a 7 out of 10. 7.5 out of 10. Very generous 7.5 out of 10. I had high expectations going into this movie from the trailers and all of the footage that we got heading into this film. And unfortunately, my expectations were not met with this movie, from the soundtrack to the way the Aquaman character was played out in this film. And I felt that the biggest strength that this movie had was in the serious tone that DC, continues to try to use in their films, because that's what DC is good at. And I feel like that's what they have to stick to. They try to be lighthearted and try to make this film like it was a part of the MCU, but for me, that did not work. And the comedy was horrendous. I never laughed. I found myself laughing twice out of an entire movie filled with comedic jokes. And I felt that, this film was a letdown from what I was going into, from what my expectations were going into this movie. So there you guys have it. There's my review for Aquaman. If you guys like this video, subscribe and hit that like button. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys next time.